joining us right now on the phone line to get more into a busy football weekend. He is Eric Edholm from Yahoo Sports. Joins us right now to talk more about the busy football weekend. Eric, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm trying to, gather my brain a little bit after Saturday's college football slate. And, Sunday, yesterday, we had a great day of football. At least some games were pretty darn entertaining. And, it's a tall order for tonight to match, but we'll see.
So before we get to anything specifically, I just want to ask you a big picture about the football weekend. It's starting to seem more and more that in a year where we were kind of led, for example, in college football, for example, to say, hey, these quarterbacks are the guys. And then in the NFL, these teams are the teams that those quarterbacks and those teams, whether it's Mahomes and the Chiefs or Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma, some of these expectations coming into the season have really just fallen on their face.
Yeah, I mean, I understand we as an industry tend to build certain guys up. They finish the year. So like take Rattler, in college, for example, obviously he finished last year on a hot streak. It felt like, he'd gotten over the benching. All right, he's the number one pick in the draft. And it's not as if there weren't scouts who weren't interested, right? So I just think Oklahoma fans booing him, in the first game, I think, against Tulane, there was some boos after the second pick. So, or what are we doing here? Can we allow the season to kind of play out a little bit? And of course he gets benched Saturday, and Caleb Williams looks great in his place. So, it's tough when these things happen. And then to your point about the NFL too, I mean, I will say this, I had a real hard time with my season predictions, trying to figure out, okay, who's the team that comes out of nowhere? Who's the team that falls off? And, it ended up being a little dart throwing mixed with some math and a little bit of, witchcraft thrown in there too for good measure. But yeah, I mean, there are always surprises. I think obviously it's not like Mahomes is a bad quarterback now. I mean, it's not like the Chiefs are an awful football team. Look who they played, but there's still some surprise. I don't think anyone had them going 2-3 in their first 5 games. The Patriots had to scratch out a win at Houston, really probably should have lost. I don't know what people's expectations were of them, but and then there were a lot of teams like the Eagles and like the Giants and like the Washington football team. And I guess you'd throw the Cowboys in there too, where you'd say basically the whole NFC East, where you'd say who's good and who isn't. You tell me, and it's going to end up coming down to the division games and who wins those. So yeah, it has been a very interesting first 5 weeks, no doubt.
Let's dig deeper on the NFC East question. I think anyone with, half an honest opinion is that they know the Cowboys are the favorite to win the division. But the other 3 teams, there are completely different situations because the Giants just can't seem to get out of their own way, whether literally or figuratively. Washington's defense, surprisingly, is one of the worst scoring defenses in the league. And the Eagles are basically Jekyll and Hyde the entire year. So, how do we paint the NFC East after the first few weeks of the season?
Yeah, it's tough. And obviously, like you said, at this point, Dallas being up essentially 2 games of the division, I think the only team with a positive point differential of the 4, I could be wrong, correct me if I am, but, it certainly feels like right now that's the way it is. And with their moderate improvements defensively, especially in the playmaking department, interceptions and big plays and such, that's really been huge for them, along with, obviously the return to health of Dak Prescott. But, if we're going to ask ourselves which of the other teams can make a run and try to knock the Cowboys out of their perch, it's a good question. I mean, it really is. Like, I know it wasn't pretty yesterday, but I thought the Eagles showed some character. I thought they really, scratching back, and they were probably lucky to be only down, 9 points or whatever it was at halftime. But, that one was huge after losing 3 straight. They needed that, and so that's at least the building block right there. And you say, boy, if the Giants could get healthy, maybe they're capable of a run. But with all the bad luck that seems to just sort of fall their way and some other questionable moves and decisions they've made, look, they're a tricky team to figure out. Washington, as you pointed out, Ron Rivera's already getting asked questions about whether he's going to start taking over the play calling, and they get Kansas City at home this weekend. So, I don't know what's going to fix that group. I really don't. I was surprised that they haven't been able to generate pressure, cover well, tackle well, some new faces, but there was a lot coming back up front that I think they were counting on to help supply, a big part of what they do defensively. So they're a tough one, obviously, and losing, their quarterback in week 1 didn't help either.
Yeah, to your point, the Cowboys are plus 53 on the point differential. The second best team, though, is the Eagles. They're minus 9 for whatever it's worth. As we mentioned, Washington, they've given up the most points in the NFC so far with 155. So, well, yeah, with all that being said, yeah, right, that number just makes you shake your head. Eric, one of the things I wanted to ask you about as well, before we get to some other things, say in the NFC East, the Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts has become basically a lightning rod at this point. You have a group of people, they're the anti-Hurts people are calling them the Hurts schmoozers, the people who are on the Hurts bandwagon. Another group of people who are like, this guy, he shouldn't be the Eagles quarterback. He's not that good. But how do we judge a player after 9 games? My contention the whole time, Eric, has been I need more than 9 games to make a decision on a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, it took, 60, 70 games to figure out Ryan Tannehill, right? Or at least to have him be used right and in a better situation. And that's not true for every quarterback, obviously. I think after about 3-4 games last year, we looked at, Justin Herbert, said, aha, this guy's pretty good. We may have underrated him coming out, things like that. But again, those are more exceptions than the rule too. So obviously the first half was kind of a disaster. I don't know how you attempt 20 passes and only gain 32 yards or whatever it was. But the long touchdown pass, the 2-point conversion, he made some plays in the second half. And, I still want to see Quez Watkins get more of a shot. I think he's outplayed Jalen Reagor to this point. I think Devontae Smith, you're going to see more and more of his emergence as well. We know the tight ends are weapons. And also, if he gets a little better help at running back too, I don't know what's going on with Miles, but I just haven't seen the same kind of vision and burst as before. And I don't know, Kenneth Gainwell, I know he didn't play a lot yesterday, but I'm a big fan, and I like what I've seen from him so far. I almost wonder if there's maybe going to be a little more shift towards him and away from Sanders. But, so the supporting cast obviously can help do a little bit of work too. They've had rotating bodies up front, injuries on the offensive line and whatnot. So that's going to be a factor. But has he been inconsistent? Yes, he has, right? The Dallas game was, it was tough to watch at parts because, it looked like he was just sort of out of sync and out of sorts, and he gets in those little funks. So the key for him, I think, is to try to avoid those situations as best you can. But you're right. We've got about a half a season of data on him. It's just not enough. It's not enough to definitively say, no, this guy can't be a starter for us, or yes, he absolutely can. So, yeah, this is a pretty good season, I think, to do some evaluation and figure out, is he at least improving? Is he cutting back on the mistakes that we kind of harped on early on? And that'll help determine that answer. I wouldn't throw the bathwater out just yet. I think there's something in this kid that's a little different, even if, you have to get used to certain things with his style.
Eric Edholm joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM. You can follow him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. Check out all of his coverage of the NFL, college football, and the NFL draft over at Yahoo Sports. Eric, a couple quarterbacks who are not Jalen Hurts I want to ask you about because, as I mentioned, you do cover the NFL draft. Where we are right now, a couple of years removed from drafts in the past, Josh Allen is looking more and more like the best quarterback from his class. And Justin Herbert is just going to a level that I think some people weren't even sure if he was able to make. What does it say to you about the development of those two guys, a guy like Allen who looked so bad his first year in the NFL, and a guy like Herbert who we saw on Hard Knocks, Anthony Lynn did not want to hand the keys to the car to him at all to start that year.
Yeah, and I'll just throw another name in there as like a parallel. I don't know if we're going to quite have the same discussion, but here in Chicago with Justin Fields, I'm sure people have at least kept one eye on that situation.
Yep.
It's Nagy, he kind of had to be arm wrestled into really giving Fields the starting job, and first only came after injury. So, you almost wonder, like, some of these guys who are being held back maybe unnecessarily, and vice versa, some quarterbacks who are thrust in there right away who may not have deserved to be in them. Zach Wilson struggled so far, and I know he's the number 2 pick in the draft. Trevor Lawrence has been up and down. So, everybody has a different path and a different pattern to get to where they need to be and a different, pace of development. But what those two guys, Josh Allen and Justin Herbert have are phenomenal traits. And I think more mental toughness than they were given credit for, too. There was some talk in the scouting circles about Josh Allen kind of sulking after interceptions or, if his receiver didn't do what he wanted or he didn't get the protection. And there were some questions about, boy, if he's, if he can't hack it up in the Mountain West, what's he going to do in the, in the NFC East or whatever, wherever he ended up landing is what they were saying at the time. So, and I think with Herbert, the whole talk about him being an introvert, his personality, is he going to be able to command a locker room and things like that? Obviously, that got overblown. But what I think the biggest factor was for him was that he played in the horizontal offense at college. And this guy clearly needs to be throwing the ball vertically. He got a few shots, obviously, in college to do that. Never had elite receivers, had good receivers. But, now that he's got a stable of wideouts, they've done a good job protecting him. Even last year when he didn't have great protection, he clearly was making some big boy throws there. It really shows that those traits can flourish if you get put in a good system and, you're brought along at the right pace and you have to figure out what that is. There is a sweet spot. It's never perfect. You got to have a guy in front of you to feel good about starting, to begin the season, obviously, but traits, big arms, athletic ability, toughness, strength, maneuverability when they're in the pocket or outside. Both guys are oozing with talent, and it just was incomplete at the college level. Allen more so than Herbert, I would say.
Let's flip it over to college, Eric. I want to ask you, because you wrote about the quarterback situation over at Yahoo Sports, and I'm just wondering, it's starting to feel more and more like the 2022 NFL draft quarterback class is going to be nowhere near what anyone expected it to be. It's starting to feel more and more like maybe all of these guys just need another year to stay in college, or maybe, they're just all on really rough situations. I mean, obviously Sam Howell and Keaton Slovis are in unenviable situations, but guys like Rattler and others, I think there were a lot more expected of them.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And maybe, just maybe, we media folks pumped these guys up a little too prematurely. I mean, Spencer Rattler, remember, was benched last year.
Yep.
He got back in the starting lineup. Pardon my dog, who's going crazy upstairs right now. But, yeah, I mean, he was benched, responded well, played well down the stretch. We essentially took about a 5-6 game sample size and said, aha, he's ready to break out. A little bit unfair, right? Now, Howell, obviously, elite recruit, started as a true freshman, came along, had the big year last year. It was a little more understandable why we vault him up, but we overlooked the fact that, UNC's talent level on the whole was down this year. The offensive line is a bad situation. There's only so much you could do there. Slovis is a mystery at UNC. Obviously, their coaching situation and everything that's going on there is certainly a factor, but him not playing well, and scouts were interested in him. His accuracy is uncanny, but everything else has looked terrible this year. So, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those deals where you say to yourself, even though we can see the trend going more towards the 3, 4, 5 quarterback round ones these days, because that's what college people think, and that's what evaluators think is going to happen. If the prospects aren't there, don't take them. Don't use first-round picks on those guys. That's just the bottom line. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting whether a Malik Willis from Liberty or a Matt Corral from Ole Miss or somebody like that can, get into that upper region of prospect level.
Yeah, and also the fact that there's no guy. You just mentioned two guys that half the country has no idea who they are. There's no clear-cut guy out there. Because everyone has a flaw, right? Every one of these quarterbacks has some sort of quote-unquote red flag that people want to wave that's against them. And I just have to wonder, if I'm an NFL team, right, and I'm trying to say, what is my quarterback situation moving forward? A team like Pittsburgh, or maybe Houston, for example, with the Deshaun Watson mess, or whatever it is. If you're a team and your scouts are coming back and giving you all these conflicting, roller coaster reports on these quarterbacks, are maybe NFL teams just going to look at the draft and be like, you know what? we're good. We're good. We're not going to draft some of these guys. We're not going to draft them high. You know, we're going to stick with what we got.
Yeah, it could be, right, especially in an offseason where, you know, Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers and other veteran quarterbacks could be available. You know, I mean, it wouldn't be shocking to see a little bit of a trend away from that. The question is obviously going to be whether, you know, I mean, remember the year when, obviously you remember because you're local, but Goff and Wentz went 1 and 2.
Oh, yeah.
Had you told people in November 1st, okay, Jared Goff's going to be first pick, Carson Wentz will go number 2, I think people would have laughed at you. I mean, Goff at least was becoming a name, but he'd had a 5-interception game at Utah. You know, he had some other kind of outings that maybe opened some question marks a little bit. You know, we tend to sort of gloss over the warts a little bit over time. So I see what you're saying. It also wouldn't shock me if in a couple months our opinion has changed a little bit.
Eric, one more before I let you go. Always appreciate you jumping on. Alabama got upset by Texas A&M. Georgia continues to roll. Iowa pulls out the win over Penn State. Ohio State continues to roll. But how many of these teams are actually better than Alabama? How much of the Alabama loss on Saturday was just Texas A&M going in there with a great plan, and how much of it was Alabama is not as good as Georgia or fill-in-the-blank team?
Well, I had questions about Alabama's offensive line, and I thought defensively they were good, maybe not great. And their defensive line, I was surprised. The line of scrimmage is really where, in my opinion, they lost that game, even with, you know, some success running the football, et cetera. But I'm with you. I mean, I still think they're going to end up one of the top 4 teams. I really do. I don't know that there are enough heavyweights out there, enough true contenders, especially in a year when Clemson struggled and other, you know, candidates to be one of those top 4, you know, outside of the Georgia and Ohio States. We haven't really seen the others really kind of step up to that level where you can kind of say, all right, they're unimpeachable. They're going to be able to slide through. So I think that loss will not end up looking quite as bad. On the road, 100,000+ people, an A&M team that's going to win this week and probably the next couple weeks too. You know, that one's going to probably also, like our draft quarterbacks, look a little better down the road.
He is Eric Edholm. Follow him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. Check out all of his coverage of the NFL draft, college football, and the NFL over at Yahoo Sports, and his latest article breaking down the NFL draft quarterbacks right now over at Yahoo Sports. Eric, always appreciate you jumping on the insights.
All right, thanks, buddy. See ya.